So, at the end of the day, what could have been a really good race in Spa was a little bit of a letdown. But that was okay, because next up on the Formula 1 calendar was Zandvoort, which we knew was going to be boring as shit. Hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the Comedy Review, the show that will now be cancelled by the Orange Army just for that opening line. You'll still have to put up with me for this week though, as F1 headed into part 2 of its latest triple header, landing amongst the sand dunes and stray flares of Zandvoort. A quick reminder that if you enjoy the video, be sure to drop it a like and get subscribed. But now, let's head into the Comedy Review for the Dutch Grand Prix.
We are a fucking bunch of wankos.
So for once in this news section, I won't have to start talking about the 2023 driver market. However, the first story still somehow involves Fernando Alonso. The Spaniard wasn't particularly happy with #blessed after the Briton took porpoising to a whole new level at Spa last week, claiming Lewis only knew how to race from the front. Hamilton didn't take too kindly to this remark, and admittedly his actions in interviews were quite funny. Then he posted the whole F1 condemns abuse thing on Instagram and the joke was still kinda good. Yeah, okay mate, now it's deader than your 2007 trim, chill out. The two seem to have made up now, which I guess at least is a good thing. But the same can't be said between Danny Rick fans and the McLaren Twitter admin. Oscar Piastri's move to Woking was finally revealed this weekend, along with the detail that he'd actually signed on the 4th of July, almost a whole week before Ricciardo claimed he was committed to McLaren and vice versa. So with McLaren's integrity about as strong as their merchandise after just one wash, let's just move on before I get any more angry. We'll talk about FP1 then. And it would kick off with Max Verstappen showing a really kind gesture to all of his fans, as he broke down right in front of them. Mercedes, on the other hand, were having a much better session, Russell topping the timing screens ahead of Lewis Hamilton. The McLarens were also quick, with Ricciardo experimenting with straightlining the chicane to find pace on his teammate. And he wasn't the only one. The Haas duo of Schumacher and Magnussen also taking a trip through the gravel, and fake gravel, which actually seems to have been a good idea for once, so yeah, fair play Formula 1 on that one. FP1 was followed, as usual, by FP2, and this time it was the Ferrari showing what they could do, as Red Bull's Friday continued to go tits up. Leclerc would top the session with Sainz in close pursuit. Verstappen and Perez, meanwhile, were stuck back in 8th and 12th, with some engineers allegedly spotted in the dunes filling more sandbags for FP3. Yuki Tsunoda would try and help out in that regard, as he got stuck on the exit of turn 9, and it was bad news for Ricciardo too, his car deciding it would rather kill itself with an oil leak. That brought Friday to a close, but Leclerc would still be on top at the end of Saturday morning. He headed Russell and Verstappen, 3 different teams in the top 3 positions. So I wonder how many seconds Max will take pole by this time. The main story of the day would be pigeons, however, with several lined up on the apex of turns 7 and 8. But really, there's a very simple solution to all this. Observe.
Yeah, well, anyway, you don't need a hoe. There's only one tool you need for gardening. And I've got it.
It's a hammer.
It'll be a hammer. It's not a hammer.
This
Is that a hoe?
is all you... See these 3 here? Ready?
Well, granted, they're gone, but you can't garden with a shotgun.
They have ceased to exist.
Turns out there was one more pigeon on the track, except it was actually Yuki Tsunoda, who held up Hamilton on his flying lap. But would the Mercedes have the all-important pace in qualifying? Well, Daniel Ricciardo wouldn't, as he failed to make it out of Q1, not helped by Sebastian Vettel attempting some rally driving ahead of his retirement at the end of the season. His teammate Lance Stroll would somehow make it in, his dad apparently buying an actual green Red Bull ahead of this weekend. Would move on to Q2, but just not for very long. The fans had been told to throw away their orange flares ahead of qualifying, but some idiot thought they must have meant throw it onto the track. And quite frankly, I think there's only one way we can deal with these imbeciles.
See these 3 here? Ready?
Q2 would get going again, and the star of the session would be Haas's Mick Schumacher, as he progressed into the shootout for pole, and made yesterday's video age like f***ing milk. Stroll would also somehow make it through, as Gasly and the 2 Alpines were the surprise knockouts of the session. All that leaves us with then is Q3, and after the first runs, it was Charles Leclerc narrowly edging out Max Verstappen at the top of the table. The Dutchman would fight back in the dying seconds, narrowly pipping the Ferrari, as it turned out the reason Perez had been all weekend was that Red Bull had been making him watch Singapore 2008 on repeat. He would spin out at the final corner, preventing the Mercedes from challenging for pole. But Max Verstappen would line up in P1 for his home Grand Prix, and after how Spa went, the big question was how many times would he lap the field before the checkered flag? So let's find out. The race hadn't got underway before Sky Sports were already talking about potential rain in the air, which is what they usually do when they notice their viewing figures drop. But in the real world, the lights were going out, and despite a challenge from Leclerc, Max Verstappen got away well, holding the lead into turn 1 while Lewis Hamilton ticked off the other Spaniard in his list of cars he'd make contact with on lap 1. He was able to recover and keep Perez behind. Meanwhile, Kevin Magnussen felt his Haas had a little bit too much downforce and thus corrected that by slamming it into the wall. This meant Daniel Ricciardo could make his one and only overtake of the Grand Prix, while Verstappen was streaming away in front. But there was still a challenge from the Mercedes, Hamilton closing back in on Sainz as his soft tyres began to fade. Deciding he didn't want a second run-in with #blessed, Sainz opted to pit, forgetting that he'd now have to contend with his Ferrari pit crew, who decided just to f*** him even more. The team seemed to forget that when changing tyres, you actually need tyres to change onto, and a wheel gun to get the job done. A wheel gun that probably wasn't meant to be flattened by Sergio Perez. At least Ferrari had got their strategy cock-up out of the way, as meanwhile Lewis Hamilton was chasing after the Mexican Minister of Defense, and looking to have the pace that could get him a race win. Yeah, that sure went to plan, didn't it? On his second attempt, Hamilton would make his way through, but then encountered Sebastian Vettel coming out of the pits, who seemed to think it was 2018 again as he fought the Mercedes through the banking. #bless was lucky to survive the ordeal, and then went on to chase after Max Verstappen, who, provided the race would stay green, would need to pit and then pass both Mercedes to get the win. What Red Bull really needed was a safety car, so it must have been convenient when Yuki Tsunoda decided to stop at the side of the track, claiming he didn't have a wheel on properly. Turns out Red Bull weren't quite ready yet, however, so Yuki kept going, stopped in the pit lane before trundling out again and retiring again. Now obviously I'm joking here, I don't actually think Red Bull fixed the race, but it does look a little bit sus, doesn't it? Anyway, Max would pit under the VSC and the Mercedes would follow him in, trying to make the best of a bad situation. That left Max on hards and Lewis on mediums, giving Hamilton the chance, albeit a slim one. However, the Mercedes started to close the gap, all before Alfa Romeo had their typical engine blow-up, which left Valtteri Bottas stranded on the pit straight and brought out the full safety car. Strategy was once again up in the air, and while Ferrari chose to overtake in the yellow flag zone, Red Bull would box Max onto softs. This meant he was now behind both Mercs, or at least he should have been, before George Russell decided to give up track position as well. That left Hamilton to fend off Verstappen on his own, all while he was on more worn tyres. Hang on. This has happened before. As Team LH continued to suffer from PTSD, Verstappen would ace the restart and get the lead back instantly into turn 1. This, understandably, made Hamilton a little bit cross, as he continued to fall back over the last 10 laps, coming home only 4th by the flag. George Russell, on the other hand, was loving life. Despite almost running into the back of his teammate, he was now pretty much guaranteed P2. His closest challengers were now the two Ferraris, one of which had a penalty, as apparently making an overtake right in front of a stranded car is against the regulations. Who knew? Sainz showed Perez what he thought of his new 5-second penalty, but no one could stop Max Verstappen, who would cross the line after 72 laps to take a deserved victory, after what I've got to admit was a fantastic Dutch Grand Prix. Can we just forget that opening line now, please? So yeah, unlike Lewis Hamilton, I actually really enjoyed that one. I'll be honest, I was expecting total Max domination, but we actually got a solid race, and almost a Mercedes win before they decided to let Ferrari make their strategy calls. Realistically though, looking at Max's pace, I don't think they'd have been able to do better than the P2 and P3 finish today, and even for that, they'd have both had to pit under the final safety car and give up track position, which at the time would have looked stupid as well. Basically, they were screwed no matter what. Still, next up is Monza, and for the last 2 years, we've had shock winners there, so I'm really excited for that one. Anyway, if you enjoyed the comedy review, be sure to drop it a like and get subscribed to the channel for videos every single week. Another big thank you to my patrons, especially Alex Rusky and William Gilroy, who signed up recently. If you want to help support me and the channel, the link along with those to all my other socials can be found down in the description below. But that's all from me. I'll see you soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.